Have you ever sat and wondered, what's wrong with me? Why can't I get my shit together? Or maybe you feel like you have your shit together, but you can't seem to break through to the next level. You find yourself cycling around your goals, not fully jumping in, committing, or maybe you're like me and you love a good challenge. So you jump all the way in and then feel the whiplash of your emotions, fear, judgment, shame, overwhelm. Why do some humans have this unbreakable resilience while others seem to run and hide from their emotional discomfort? This is the question I ask myself on a daily basis, and the one I am determined to solve on this podcast. I'm here to ask the emotionally uncomfortable questions and help women thrive in all areas of their life. I'm a TEDx speaker, author of Dying to Be a Good Mother, and host of this podcast. I'm here to help women take radical responsibility for how they want to feel in all areas of their life so they can show their children how good life can feel. I started my career as a social worker, helping adults see and understand their children's behavior. But it wasn't until stage 4 cancer in 2013 that pushed me to take a deeper stand for change, uncovering how cultural expectations sabotage our dreams. I've been featured in Forbes, Entrepreneur, Real Simple, Google, Mind Body Green, and more. And the number one question I get asked over and over again is, Heather, how do you do it all while having energy left over? Simple answer is, I don't. I plan my week in alignment with how I want to feel. And I want to show you exactly how to do this yourself. So head on over to Heather Chauvin, CHAUVIN.com/energy. heatherchauvin.com/energy. I have some freebies over there for you. Videos, PDFs, bonuses, how to stop yelling, how to hold healthy boundaries, and the common reasons why women block their success. Let's dive in to today's episode.
I was sitting in a doctor's office, basically begging for change, for a spark of hope, the possibility that I didn't have to exist this way. I'd always felt like I'd been geographically misplaced in the Midwest, and that feeling began to resurface with a vengeance after a few years of being back home. In the middle of one particularly long, hard, brutal winter, I didn't even recognize myself anymore. I was tired all the time, angry, resentful. I refused to leave the house any more than absolutely necessary. My body ached when I get into my car headed for work on dark, frosty mornings. I was existing, but barely. When I stumbled upon seasonal affective disorder, it all clicked. As I sat there at the doctor's office in my paper gown, I burst into tears. I'm just so sad and angry all the time. I have no energy. She agreed that it was likely seasonal affective disorder, and just as my heart began to lift, her response was, I'll put in an order for Prozac. But wait, that wasn't what I wanted. There's absolutely a time and place for medication, but I wanted to explore other options first. I didn't want a magic pill to make the symptoms disappear. I wanted a solution to the problem. It was at that time that I realized that I was the only one who was going to be able to make the change for myself. I realized that I didn't want a life where I was basically hibernating for what felt like half the year. And I certainly didn't want that for my kids. I knew plenty of people who actually enjoyed winter and the outdoors. And I decided that I needed to take drastic change for them as much as for myself. I started taking little actions. I talked to other providers and started some natural protocols. I found a 365 outside challenge with the goal of getting outside every day throughout the year. I thought it sounded crazy, especially with a toddler and a baby in our sub-zero winters, but knew it was exactly what I needed. So I began to have us go outside every day. It was a big struggle for a while. The children didn't like snow gear and were often resistant. I was having to give myself pep talks on the coldest days to get out there. Some days, the sheer act of us getting ready took longer than the time that we were actually outside. Fitting it in wasn't always easy. There were times we would just throw our winter gear and play on the snow mounds in the parking lot for 15 minutes between errands. In between those less than ideal times, though, there were moments when the light began to poke through. Some glorious days we would spend a couple hours in the woods, enchanted in our environment. Eventually, it got easier. The children came to expect it. We invested in the proper gear, and it became much more comfortable to be out. I began to expect it, and I noticed how my thoughts had created my reality. I would stare outside in the distance that looked so terrible while refreshing my weather app, hoping for a change in the low temps. But once we got out there, I realized more often than not, it was much better than I expected. That I was making it worse in my head. How winters didn't actually last for almost 6 months. I started to notice the beauty of the seasons. I began to invite other families to join us once or twice a week, and it became a part of our lifestyle. The change was so gradual. I don't even remember when it happened. But one day I looked at my husband and said, I think I've changed. I feel better. I'm not as angry. I don't feel so crabby all the time. He replied in complete seriousness, yes, you are completely different. My circumstances hadn't changed, but I was different. I had changed my story, the story I told myself about who I am and what I do or don't do, and what I like or don't like. I now enjoy winter sports, ice skating, sledding, skiing, and winter hiking. I barely recognize myself. I noticed a change in the seasons and the beauty that was always all around me that I refused to acknowledge before. I am much more pleasant and enjoyable to be around, and I feel better. And while I still like to break up the winter with a nice beach vacation, the best part is that I changed the narrative for our family. My kids love all the seasons. They enjoy going outside in all weather, and they get to take that resiliency and sense of exploration into the rest of their lives, unburdened by a constant need to seek comfort. They are adventurous and free. We're learning together, and it's changed the whole dynamic of our family. And it all started from a willingness to try something new, to desire more for my family, and most importantly, myself.
Thank you. I could see the tears coming. I got really excited, Christina, because you know how much it brings me joy to make you cry.
Oh, yes, you love it.
But seriously, I think this is why I love storytelling and why I change the topic or or how we open the podcast when we're doing interviews, because it's so easy for us to I'm not talking about for interviews. I'm talking about life in general. It's so easy to stay surface level, right? To go to the doctors and say, what's wrong with me? Get a prescription, which, like you said in your story, is fine. Great. Awesome. Do what you need to do. I love medication. I've taken medication, but have the courage to ask yourself, not this, not this, not this, then what? And I love that in you. Where do you think well, first of all, tell me, how did you feel writing this story?
I think that looking back, I don't you don't necessarily take the time to look at the moments that kind of changed or had an impact. And like I said, it was so gradual that when I went back and I was looking and trying to come up with what story I would use, I didn't realize that this would be it. But I think that this was something that kind of changed the course for me, and then also for how we live our lives and what we have as a family. So when I was writing it, I got a little bit emotional, and just looking back and seeing the change that we can make as women, as the mothers of the family, and the impact that can have on our whole family.
Yeah. I wrote down a few things, and I could feel myself, and I may get emotional too, but I've been there so many times where you have this sense of hope inside of you, right? Obviously, like somewhere inside of you is like change needs to happen in any area of your life. You know, whoever's listening to this, where they're like, I just need to change. I just need to change. And I love like you wrote a line that was like, the light began to poke through. And I remember those moments in my life where you're like, oh my God, it's working. It's working. And the trust and the faith, like all of that that's needed when you say it was so incredibly gradual, and like nature is gradual. And yet we just want to plow through change, and we want to like beat ourselves up, be like, oh, I'm not good enough. I wasn't perfect today. So what do you like? Yeah, I'm just curious your thoughts on like gradual change, having that spark of hope, like the light is poking through.
Yeah, I think that for me, and I get super impatient and I want things to change and change immediately. Like, okay, I did it. Let's go. Now, where is my reward? How can I feel better?
Yeah.
But I think that in any part of my life where there's actually been sustainable change, it has been those gradual, like 1% better. It's that habit stacking. It's all the things that we talk about, where it is just the individual moments that you make consistently that really create that change.
So I believe, okay, first of all, we're all human, right? Like I'm right there in the thick of it. And like this morning, raising a 17-year-old, I'm like, this fucking kid is going to be, I'm like, I got the next book. But like, I thought I let go of control. And then he's like, I'm literally watching myself in a mirror where he's like, nope, you got another layer of control you got to let go of. And I'm like, fuck. And, it's that double-edged sword, because it's like that persistence, right? Your quote unquote impatience is the driver of why you didn't stop, like why you just didn't accept and stay. And then the shadow side of that is when we push too far, we fall into the hustle or the burnout or whatever that is. So what has your relationship been with that, of like the push and then the patience, like how you've grown? Obviously we're never perfect, but like what you're learning about that.
Yeah, I think that it changes, depending on what area of my life. I think that I have these stages that I have to go through. So it's the push and the go, and like that ambitious impatience. And then it's sitting back and then realizing, oh, wait, no, I've been here before. This doesn't work. And then it's that letting go and that surrendering, like you're talking about the control. And not the control of what I have control over, because I think that it's still really important to make sure that like I'm doing the things that I need to, but to let go of the control over the outcome and the timing of that. So then giving it a little bit more grace and kind of letting it flow. And one of the things that I've really been leaning into is just letting it be easy. So when I first had started, even like this, when we were going outside, it was like, okay, we're going to go outside and we're going to go and we're going to spend all this time. But that wasn't sustainable. So it was just, okay, how can I make this happen? Okay, we have errands all day. We're doing all these things. When are we going to get it in? Throw the stuff in the back of the car. Let's just go play on some snow piles. And did you have a time?
I'm just curious. Was there like a timeline of like, okay, we have to be outside for an hour? Like, what did that look like?
So of course I had expectations. Originally, I wanted to be able to we would go outside, and in the summertime we spend like big chunks of our days outside. But in the winter, we weren't going out hardly at all. So my timeline was 15 to 20 minutes is what I wanted to have as a minimum. And then on some days, it wound up only being 10 or 15. But 20 minutes was my going into. But then as I kind of leaned into it a little bit and felt into it, it was like, okay, as long as we're getting out there, then that's fine. We had some really, really cold spouts where there wasn't even any snow to play with. So we're just standing out there basically.
You're just standing there freezing your ass off. You're like, I have a timer on. I have a timer on. I love that. Okay. So I can see a correlation. I'm sure you have put this connection too. So you're in the mastery program, and I've tried to brainwash everybody about like micro habits, because when we come in and we're so overwhelmed or we want change, it's like, oh my God, all or nothing. And then we have to learn how to calm down the nervous system and then relax into this process. But I believe if you've achieved one challenge, you can translate those skills into another challenge. Mm-hmm. And I want to talk about homeschooling.
Yeah.
Because I've had conversations with you where it's like something I'm struggling with, and you're like, Heather, you do this all the time. Like, why is this hard for you? And then vice versa, right? I just find it so interesting how one person's like, oh, that's so easy for me. And then another person is like, oh my gosh, that's so uncomfortable for me. But how a challenge like this, like the 365 challenge, like getting outside and then learning to homeschool is related with like imperfection.
Yeah, I think that all of it, we expect so much perfection. And honestly, the perfectionist in me was a little upset when we finished our year because we had missed like 8 days. So it was like the whole 365, but we had missed 8 days because we were sick or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think that it's that letting go and then just seeing where it goes. And I think in terms of homeschooling, that is an area where I have this drive where it's like, okay, we're going to do it. I'm going to plan it all. We're going to have all this stuff set up. And then it's the trusting and learning to trust myself, and then also trusting my kids. And being able to let go of that control, I think, has been the biggest thing that it's like my lesson that I have to keep learning all the time is like, okay, I can plan and I can make my ideas and I can have all this stuff, but then like going back to letting go of the process of it so much, and then really honing in on what I'm doing it for and what my goals are for it. So my goals for this were pretty clear. My goals for homeschooling are that I really want my kids to love learning. I want them to be curious. I want them to investigate and have that like scientific mind where they're just constantly wanting to know more about things. I want them to have the freedom to be able to explore areas and the time to be able to explore the areas that they're interested in. I want them to really have that sense of self. Mm-hmm. So when I go through homeschooling and I look at some of it, and it's sometimes you'll look at it and you look at what other people are doing, and everybody does it a little bit differently, but it's what curriculum can I use? What can I do with all this stuff? But if you actually step back and get out of all of that and go back to the goals, then you can really just find and then let go of that control so much to just say, this is what's going to work, and this is what's going to work for us and our family. And then that's been really easy for me to lean into and to trust, because I do have that trust in myself and my ability to be able to trust my kids and watch them and watch and see what they're interested in and really just hone in on that and those bigger goals that we have.
Okay. We have to talk on that because you said, I trust myself. Mm-hmm. That is a statement that I don't think a lot of people can say. So how people are like, how do you begin to trust yourself? So how do you think you started? Because you're right. If you trust yourself, it is way easier to trust other people, like your children, right? You're like, ooh, I remember being there. I could see it. Like it's a mirror. But when you haven't done the work, then we're just puking our fear on other people. So how did you learn how to trust yourself or begin that process?
I think I've always had areas of my life where I felt very confident. And then there's other areas where I completely don't. I feel out of my depth. And I think when I went into motherhood, I went into it a little bit later. I was almost 30. I wasn't sure if I was even going to have kids. We were still kind of having that conversation. And then it was here. So I think that I went into it with a lot of uncertainty a little bit. And then just as the relationship developed, and again, I would look to, because I'm a researcher, so I would research all kinds of different things and look into all different kinds of approaches and how people do stuff. But as I would do it, every time that I'd implement something, it was like, does this feel right for me? No. Does this feel right to me? Maybe parts of it. And it was just kind of that gradual, like, okay, this feels really good, and this part I don't agree with. So I'm going to just move into and just leaning into those little pieces. And then eventually it just built up this confidence and this trust that it was like, you know what? I am not going to do the traditional path, and that's okay. And, there are some people in my life that have taken untraditional paths, but there's a lot of them that do take the traditional path. And I think it's just that what's right for me and finding that out, and then just lean into just a little bit and then just a little bit more. We didn't start homeschooling. I didn't ever say, oh, I'm going to homeschool. It just kind of evolved. Mm-hmm. And it was when I was looking at my child, and my oldest is extremely active, and just, I could not picture him sitting in the classroom when he was 6 and just being able to handle that. And so it was just kind of conversation between us. We had looked into some things, and it was, okay, well, we'll just homeschool for this year. Okay, we'll homeschool them for next year. Oh, wait, this is working. And so it just was kind of this development, and we'll continue to evaluate that. It's not that we're stuck on one thing, but I think it's that communication, that openness, and just really leaning into what is feeling right for us.
I love this. I'm feeling this energy of not being rigid, right? Like you have no wonder why we get along so well. You have a plan, but you're not like, you can still feel the emotional discomfort when the plan doesn't go accordingly. You're like, oh, that's my perfectionism. That's this. Like you have that self-awareness, and you can feel what I would, I'm using air quotes, emotionally uncomfortable, right? That's the whole point of this podcast. You're like, that's my shit coming up. I got to feel my shit, rather than trying to control it and be like, oh my God, what do we do? I don't know what the future is so uncertain, da, da, da. And when you approach things with this like curiosity, fun, like this is working right now. I don't know where we're going to be 6 months from now or a year from now. So now you're stepping into this new endeavor. Mm-hmm. And we gain confidence. Like, I think confidence comes just from repetition, just from consistency, right? I'm like, oh, I've had to pull myself out of that hole so many times. I'm confident I could do it 100 more times. Then we take on another project or another area of our life. And although these skills are transferable, why do you think when something is new, it takes us a little bit of time to get into that state of momentum?
I think especially for people that may identify as perfectionists, or for people that have very high standards or have achieved a lot, or, have that where they think that they just should be good at it right away. Like, I should just be great at this. I'm trying this brand new thing. I should be great at it. And I should know exactly what I'm doing and all this. And I think that that's kind of the mindset that, at least for me, that I take into it, is like, okay, I'm trying this new thing, but I should already be good at it. And so that gap between where your skills are at, because it's something new, versus the expectations, that's like, I have high expectations. So the expectations that I have for myself is, and then there's a gap there, I think that it kind of gets onto our confidence. So it'll kind of eat away at that, and like, oh, well, maybe this isn't right for me, or maybe I'm not good at this. And I think that it's because we don't have that experience. Like you're talking about, the repetition, and expecting ourselves to be good at something right away versus moving into an area of constant learning. And so that's what I keep trying to bring myself to, is like, okay, this is just me learning. And then taking those little steps and building that momentum so that then I can have the skills to be able to do this more, or to be able to get where I want to be. But letting go of that expectation, it's hard and it's real. Yeah. So I think that that's where, for me, that's the struggle.
I find it too, when you, like, it's the comfort zone. Like this constant learning and evolution of growth of like learning new skills and becoming a different person is, I don't want to say it's a life commitment or like it's a lifestyle, but to me, at my stage in my life where I am with my personal development, it's a game to me. Like it's a game now where there's a lot of things that I don't know. And I remember, during the pandemic, when I decided to change my nutrition patterns and my movement patterns, and I still have a lot of resistance to working out consistently. The food has been drastic. Like it's automatic most of the time now. I still have to prep a little bit, but holy shit, like learning that new skill, where I'm like, what's wrong with me? Why am I a failure? All the stories that come in, and it's just that persistence of like being willing to feel your shit and not give up, which is why I think mentorship is so, so important, because I see a lot of people that the fear of failure is so strong that they won't even try. And I'm like, you're literally capable of this, but you don't know how to manage your fear. And therefore your fear is eventually going to kill you. Like, end of discussion. Like it will come out sideways in some capacity and kill you mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and your relationships will blow up if you let fear run the show. So I want to ask you, like, what is your current relationship to fear?
I think for me with fear, where I go to avoidance. So if I have something that I am afraid to do, I will avoid it. And it gets to the point where I'm just like, okay, I'm done with this. Like, I'm just going to go and I'm going to do it. And then I'm going to see. But I think also it's that consistency piece too. So if there's something that I can do, and again, the quick reward, if there's something that I can do and be scared of it and then do it and feel that sense of accomplishment, then it's amazing. If it's something that I'm afraid to do and then it's a continual, that is going to take a lot of effort. And it's going to take a lot of like soul searching. And I think trying different things and then trying, different approaches and then going back to what feels right for me. So I think that when you get emotionally uncomfortable and when you're doing these things, that I think that there's a difference between being emotionally uncomfortable for the moment that you're doing something or the thing that you're afraid of, but in the long run, it's going to be good. So like if I would get myself, when I was running a lot and I would get myself out, I would not want to do it. I would not want to do it for the day. I would not want to do it for the next day. But afterwards, I always felt good. And I think that it's that going back to then trusting yourself and taking that emotionally uncomfortable and that fear and then spurring that into action. And then that action getting you to the place where it feels good. So it has to be that action that you're taking feels so much better eventually. It doesn't have to be immediate, but eventually to where you are right now. And it's making that mind shift and really being able to see those longer term results.
Yeah. Yeah. Waiting for the light to begin to poke through. Like
right.
Like this morning, so I'm training for a marathon. So here, it's that psychological game, right? So January 1, I was like, fuck this shit. I'm done with COVID. Like, just, my, I don't even know what mindset or personality trait that is, but I tend to like the pressure, like you can feel the emotional discomfort of like your contrast. You're like, I'm done with this. And I don't like being controlled, which is why I'm controlling to my children. And then they mirror that back to me and they're like, I'm sorry, Mom, you're not raising a sheep. Like I'm just like, this is awful. This is so awful. Like raising yourself is awful, like a tiny child. So January 1st, I'm like, okay, it's an in-person marathon this year. I'm going to do it. Why? I said I'd never run another marathon. I've only run halves. Well, run another half, Heather. No. Why would I do that? Run a full. Why? I don't know. So I signed up for it. Step 1, scared shitless, right? So then I have to commit to actually training because that's my default is avoidance, just like you. And then I show up to the race and then I don't do well. And then it doesn't matter because I didn't really try. So I can't fail because I didn't try. So then I'm like, okay, I don't care. I just want to cross the finish line. I don't care if I walk, run, whatever. I've ran 2 halves. I'm a different person now than I was previously. So I'm like, what is my goal of this actual race? My goal is the training. My goal is the race is just the icing on the icing on the cake, whatever it is. The goal is to actually stop fucking procrastinating and take baby actions. And then in some moments, the light will poke through, right? So what do I do? So here's my thing. And then I want an example in your life and I want it from building your business. So you're like, damn you. So here I am going, great. What's my next hurdle? My next hurdle is accountability. I know I can, I don't know why people have convinced themselves that they need to do everything in life by themselves, but I'm like, I can't do this by myself. I'm going to overdose myself on support, right? I'm going to go get those massages. I'm going to go to the chiropractor. I'm going to go to PT. I'm going to do all the things. I'm going to utilize all my benefits. I'm going to actually fucking put this shit on my calendar and I'm going to do it. And then when I don't want to follow through, I'm going to like call a friend and be like, why am I not doing this? So I'm feeling my resistance, people. Then I'm like, well, I actually have to run. So I contact an old friend who runs. She's a slow runner like me. Boom. Now we're doing morning runs, right? 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Day 2, my husband goes, oh, I'm so proud of you. And I was like, why? He goes, you went for a run this morning at 6:30. I'm like, yeah, the only reason why I got out of bed is because somebody was going to knock on our door. That's the only reason why I showed up today. But I'm telling you right now, that was 6 hours ago. I feel proud of myself, right? Just checking that little proud box. And it's not about the run. It's about fucking showing up. There's my sermon. So I'm curious how because this is not comfortable for me right now. People are like, what gets you motivated? Like, what is your motivation, Christina, to keep going? Because now you're diving into business. You're putting yourself out there more. You're being seen. Like, what is your motivation to keep going and doing the emotionally uncomfortable work?
Yeah, I think that's big. And I think that's something that I tend to, I'm very away motivated, not this. No, I don't want this. But the towards motivation is something that I've been struggling with a little bit, is what am I looking for specifically? And I think that's where you get a little bit, when you aren't really clear on that, is where I will jump in and out. Okay, I'll try a little bit. No, that didn't feel great. And I don't have enough of that motivation. I don't have enough of this clear view of what I want to be able to push through that and keep pushing through that. And I think that's something that is my biggest struggle. And I think for right now, it's getting more clear, is that I want to be able to impact other people. I want people to be able to feel better. I feel so much better than I did a year ago, than I did 5 years ago. It's just a continual growth. And I think the opportunity to be able to have that impact, and the impact that can have on my family, and the impact that can have on me personally, as I continue to grow, because I feel like I am constantly looking for what's the next thing that I really need to lean into. So I think that getting clear on that helps to make that a little, because being seen is uncomfortable for me. And putting myself out there is very uncomfortable for me, but I think it is. And when you're talking about, the training or whatever, I would sign up I've done several halves, and I would do several halves and sign up for them and then not train. And then conversely, I would train and then not sign up for the half. So I couldn't fail either way. So it wasn't that I was afraid of the work, but it's the expectation once I put that work in, and I couldn't get those to line up. But I think as you were saying that, like, that's what it is. It's that I couldn't fail. So I would train without an end date in mind, and I could get the training done, or I would have the race and then I wouldn't train all the way. And then it was fine if I didn't hit the time that I want, or, whatever it was.
Yeah, that reminds me too, where I've had a few moments in my life, and I'm curious if you can reflect on a moment that you've had. And maybe it goes back to like the story you told at the beginning, because I'm sure there were moments where you've committed to something, right? You're like this 365, regardless of those 8 days that you missed. But a moment of panic where you're like, I've committed to something, and the only way out is through. Because that moment of panic, to me, I mean, there's definitely like brain science behind it, of like the fight or flight, and you choose to like almost an outer body experience and choosing the action that's required instead of your body's emotional response.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of moments like that. One that's coming to mind, just because we were just talking about running, is I never identified myself as a runner either. So I feel like in my life, I keep changing my narrative on how and who I identify as. And so I was never an athletic or anything like that. And when I started running, I just started with the 0 to 5K or whatever. and did that. And it was the push of like, if I don't do this today, then tomorrow will be worse. And I remember going through my pregnancies, and I ran through my pregnancies too, because I was so terrified that if I stopped, that I wouldn't be able to start again. And I knew how hard that starting was. And so it was, each time, and it'd be the week, and like week 21 or whatever that I'm pregnant, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this, and I'm just going to run. And it's like, okay, well, if I don't run today, next week is going to be worse. So I think that it was those moments when it was just like, all right, I'm here. I don't want to do this, but I know if I don't do it, I'm going to regret it later.
Yeah.
And then that pushing through, and that's the push that I needed to be able to just keep myself going, was that continual forward looking.
I love this. This is like, I don't even want to call it you could call it a personality trait. You could call it whatever it is, but this is the secret sauce that I don't believe can be taught. So I feel like somebody has it or they don't. And I think it needs to be nurtured and brought out and massaged and practiced. But I'm always curious why some people are willing to show up and do the emotionally uncomfortable work while others are not, because it actually can feel easy, right? You're like, okay, I went outside for 20 minutes today. Boom, check. Like, okay, I ran for 20 minutes this morning. I didn't die. I don't need a nap. That was easy. Why am I overcomplicating this? So what do you say? Now I want to go back to that old self. Like, what do you say to that woman? Maybe it was the version of you, or maybe it's another woman listening to this that was the old version of you. And she's walking into the doctor's office and she's like, I am chronically fatigued. I'm angry. I'm resentful. I'm sure there's a million different reasons that I need medical attention and support, but I don't, on a personal level, don't even know where to begin taking responsibility for my emotional health and all of that. Because I feel like a lot of people seek professional help and they put a lot of the power in the professional. And it's like, no, they're there to co-create with you. They're a tool. They're a tool in your toolbox. So what do you say to that version of you and someone listening?
I think that it's a matter of like looking inside yourself, because you're the one that has the answers in it. And I have definitely gotten professionals that I've looked into, and all of that is really great. And having that validation, I think, is really what we're looking for, is that somebody to say, yes, I see you, I see your pain. But then it's the matter of whether you want that quick fix, or if you want to actually change who you are, and that you have the power and the ability to do that. And I think that there are definitely personalities that are much more able to see that. But I think that it's for anybody has that ability to be able to do it. And you don't have to do anything big. It's just something small, and starting there and really just trusting in yourself on what that is and what you need. Because I think that if we take the time to just explore, and that can be scary in and of itself, to just explore what that is, or what we might want, that we'll find that one next step. And you don't need somebody else necessarily to tell you what that is, because that may be the next step for them, but it may not be your next step. But I think that having somebody maybe to be able to bounce ideas off of, or to get some of that, is really important. But to be able to really just focus in on yourself, trust yourself, and listen to what you want and whatever that next step is. And again, tiny changes can make a big change if you're just willing to start.
I actually remember like hearing that message over and over again, and then believing that was bullshit. And then being like at the start of something and being like, well, that's easy for you to say because you're on the other side of it now. And like, I don't know, like last week going to the gym, and I'm like, oh shit, there's like a whole bunch of men in this corner. I have to like just make my way, right? Like just push through. And when I first started going to the gym, I would have been like, I'm going home. Like, I'm not going in there. And now I'm like, fuck you, like move over. like this is my space. I have to like own the space. So when I see that and I'm like, oh, that's a little intimidating. I'm like, no, walk up and own your space. You deserve to be in that room too. But that took consistency and for the many times I'm like, I didn't go to the gym today, or I only did half my workout because the other half, there was people there and and it gave me social anxiety. So it's like, just keep showing up. So I know you have a message, and we're going to get people to, I love it when I'm all about connection. So I want people to go find you on Instagram and send you a message after they listen to this and letting them know your biggest takeaway. But what are you stepping into right now? What's the message that you're putting out into the world, and who do you want to support?
Yeah, so I think that what I am working on is helping for people and women particularly to identify when they are feeling out of that and getting back to that trusting themselves and being able to take that into their lives so that they can live in alignment with the values that they have, whether that is getting outside, whether that is just taking that next step on going for a walk every day, but being able to find their joy and whatever that version of joy is for them, and really being able to incorporate that. Because I think that when you trust yourself and lean into it, that joy piece comes, and that's what you need to follow, is what actually is going to spark and light you up. Because I feel like all of us have a spark inside of us, and we're just waiting for it to come out.
I love this. So I know you have meetups and other things coming up. Where are these meetups? All of the things. Tell people where they can find you and what you got going on.
So we have virtual meetups right now. We will be doing some in-person ones. I'm in the Midwest in Wisconsin. So if you happen to be around here, look me up and we can maybe connect that way. But we are doing virtual meetups, monthly meetups throughout the summer. And then you can get more information on that or some other opportunities to work with me at, I'm on Instagram at Christina Slayback, and it's CHRISTINA. S as in Sam, LA, B as in boy, ACK.
I love it. Any last words of wisdom on your heart for women listening?
I think that you know what it is that you need. And I think that finding a community and finding support is super important and super helpful, and you don't have to do it alone.
Awesome. On that note, Christina, I want to ask you, what has your experience been like in mastery?
I have really enjoyed my time in Mastery. I think that it's helped to solidify some of the things that I already knew, and also to incorporate new learnings through it. I've had the opportunity to work with you and also with some of the other coaches in your group, as well as just the community aspect is one of my favorite things. So being able to connect with other people. And I think one of the biggest things that we don't always realize is just that community, and that you're not alone, and everybody's going through the same things. And so having that support and having people to be able to share ideas with and to be able to connect with, and then the support that you provide has been just life-changing. It's been great.
So having me kick your ass.
Yes. Having you make me cry on the regular has been making me feel my emotions.
I love it.
I normally stuff down.
I love it. All right, Christina, thank you so much.
Thank you.
There it is. You just listened to the Emotionally Uncomfortable podcast. If you want to take this conversation to the next level, head on over to our private Facebook group community, heatherchauvin.com/Facebook. My last name is spelled CHAUVIN. That's heatherchauvin.com/Facebook. Also, if you are a huge fan of the show, please rate and review it on iTunes. Every review helps another woman like you take back control of how she wants to feel and become emotionally uncomfortable. I truly believe the better we feel, the more alive we become. This is how we are going to change the world. And if you've been watching me for a while, if you've been on the fence and you're curious, how can Heather help me? head on over to heatherchauvin.com/work with me to check out my mastery and mastery business coaching programs. That's heatherchauvin.com/work with me.